Same old man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So simple.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for February 29th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. We are once again recording this on Leap Day.
Leap Day. Frog Day.
Which is very exciting. I don't get to say February 29th very often. We've already released our review of The Promised Land. We recorded both of these reviews on the same night. So for those
I feel like February 29th is the day of The Promised Land because it just doesn't come very often.
It's true. It does not come very often.
Yeah.
And it's promised to us every 4 years. So
exactly. Oh, nice work. Nice work there.
Thank you. We hope everyone enjoyed that episode. And now we are here to talk about another international feature from 2023, The Teacher's Lounge. This is the German film.
Yeah.
And fun fact, this was the last 2023 movie I saw before our award show.
Oh, so you remember it very well then, is what you're trying to say.
Very much like The Promised Land. For those that listen to that, I saw this 2 months ago now. So
it's always hard when you're cramming a bunch of movies on top of each other. You got to hopefully, find ones that are going to stick. But something tells me this one did stick for a lot of people, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I heard really good things about this film from a lot of people, which is why I wanted to try to fit it in before we did the awards show. I wasn't exactly sure if it would make a dent in any of my categories for those that listened to the award show. Spoiler alert, it did not. But we're going to talk about the movie because, like The Promised Land, even though it had an awards run in 2023, this is now trickling out to theaters, at least here in the United States, a few weeks ago. And like The Promised Land, we planned to do this a few weeks ago when it was more in theaters, and scheduling got in the way. So here we are. We're a few weeks late.
You're a few weeks late. I feel like this one might be a bit more top of mind when we're releasing this because we are very close to the Oscar ceremony as we're recording this. It's in about a week and a half from this point right now. And unlike The Promised Land, which was submitted by Denmark but didn't score an Oscar nomination for Best Foreign Language Film, this film from Germany is nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. Yes.
Absolutely. So we'll see if it wins or not. Spoiler alert, it won't.
It won't.
But
it won't. And,
it is
and
nominated.
Honestly, probably should not.
I agree with that as well, but I don't want to lay my cards out too much in advance. But yeah, the Zone of Interest is going to win that category at the Oscars. There's just no way around that. It's going to win that category as it should. Yeah. But you are right. Yes, the Teacher's Lounge, which is what we're here to talk about, was nominated. Nominated. So with that, I think we can go ahead and jump into this. It is
Let's do this.
Directed, and I'm just going to get this out of the way now. I profusely apologize for butchering any and all of these names.
You're speaking for both of us, my friend.
But this is directed by İlker Çatak, and it stars Leonie Benish, Michael Klammer, Eva Lebeau, and Leonard Stetnish, among many others that come and go.
Many children.
Throughout the film. Many children, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with the Teacher's Lounge, when one of her students is suspected of theft, teacher Carla Nowak decides to get to the bottom of the matter, caught between her ideals and the school system. The consequences of her actions threaten to break her. All right.
Like, I love the animation you sometimes give these plot synopses. Like, I really do.
We gotta, set the tone for the conversation.
I don't know if this one needed it because I feel like the tone's already kind of there.
Fair enough. All right, Brendan, what did you think about The Teacher's Lounge?
So this is nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. It's not going to win, as we're talking about.
Nope.
Should it win? I mean, I would say it should go to Perfect Days, but that's just me. You'd
I
probably say it should.
would've I'm getting
Yeah.
ahead of myself, but since we're
Yeah.
on the matter,
Yeah.
I would have nominated The Promised Land over this. I'm just saying.
I like The Promised Land more than this as well. I just responded more to the filmmaking of that film, and
Yeah.
I do think the Teacher's Lounge is a very effective film, not even just as a film, but also from a filmmaking standpoint. I think where this film succeeds in its management of tone, this is the kind of film that if you're thinking of becoming a teacher, don't watch this. This
Yeah.
is one of the most stressful experiences I've had in a long time. And this is coming from someone like myself that has actually thought about maybe shifting gears and becoming a teacher someday. That's actually something I'm not opposed to, maybe, doing a career path exploration at some
Sure.
point. Like I've always found an intrigue in that kind of job, depending on the material, the grade, and maybe like the class you're teaching. All those factors certainly play into it. But
Yeah.
man, this is a way to, really detract someone from that kind of line of work. This is a very stressful experience of how everything just goes so horribly wrong for Carla here. And I do think the film is effective in kind of showcasing this sort of like internal tug of war that Carla has for what she feels is right, but also going about it in the wrong ways. So the story here is around this ongoing theft that is constantly happening at this school, and it's a school of I guess it's elementary school the way it's defined here in the States. So of course the natural instinct is to blame the students. So you're going to start searching students, and maybe there's a very improper way of doing that. And I think the school system here is represented as a system. It's kind of systematic, and it sort of takes advantage of its power to get what it wants. And Carla certainly doesn't agree with that because she likes to look at the perspective of her class, of her students. She believes in them. So then she takes an action that she thinks is right, and there's a ripple effect, I'll simply say. That's all I'll say. We'll talk about it further. But this it's an effective film because it made me feel so uneasy, almost queasy. I'm never going to watch this again. But it's effective. I actually think one thing that really does work here is Leone Benish's performance. I think it is quite great. At times, the film is got such a heightened energy. It's kind of funny at times. Like it's not a comedy, but it almost plays like one. And I think the way it balances that tone is pretty effective. So it's certainly not one of my favorite foreign language films of last year, but I do think it's worth seeing simply because I think it's effective. But I say that with a couple asterisks because it's not going to be for everyone, and I mean that literally. Like it's going to be unsettling for certain people depending on what your profession is, and I in some ways I think this movie maybe carries a bit of a trigger warning. So I just take that with a grain of salt. But I do think for what it is an effective film.
Yeah, I liked it. I didn't wholly love it.
Okay.
The film presents some fascinating complexities as it relates to power structures within the school system. As you're talking about, its depiction of the teacher-student relationship raises some compelling questions. However, because of the framing here, I'm not sure its ideas quite reach the levels it's going for. And I think
That's
the
fair.
writing of Carla is quite uneven. And I think that is the main culprit here, more than the performance, because Leone Benesch is very good from moment to moment, but there are times throughout the film where it felt like I was watching two completely different characters. In one scene, she's extremely confident and poised. Then in the very next scene, she's hesitant and ambivalent. And look, I love a great polarity, but in this case, I don't think that dichotomy is purposeful. It feels manufactured and forced, which I think is a result of the screenplay constricting setting and scope, especially when it comes to this, I'll say vaguely, this video that is recorded. It's a conscious move that was done with intention,
Yeah.
but it's never fully admitted as to Carla's involvement in it. It never comes out.
Yeah.
So much of the drama here would be easily avoided if she just provided context and explained her reasonings, something any normal person would do in her situation. But then you wouldn't have a movie. The drama would be much more muted. So İlker Çatak gives Carla an ignorance that just doesn't feel true to the character. And I couldn't shake how false it feels throughout this film. But if you're able to get past that, there are some great things here. And to your point, I would also still recommend it. But I struggled. I very much struggled. I liked it. I think there's enough there with the performance on its own terms. When I strip away the contrivance of the screenplay and the complexities of power structures within the school system is a topic that is honestly quite prominent, perhaps in Germany as well, which is maybe why they made this movie.
To talk about. Yeah.
In the United States, power structures and the school system are it's a hot topic here.
Yeah.
So I do think much of that translates overseas, and I think there's a lot to mine out of this film in that regard. But on a personal level with Carla, the character, the way it is written here, I don't think it's great. I don't think it's great.
I think I was able to get over that contrivance, although I don't necessarily disagree that the execution and the maneuvering of that is a little wonky. I think where I'm able to get away, or not get away, but where I'm able to, I guess, forgive the contrivance a little bit is maybe looking at it from Carla's perspective as someone who believes that she is always doing the right thing for her students. So when she realizes she has done the wrong thing, it's so new to her that she feels the need to protect herself by lying about it. And I think that is kind of a human response, but I'm not sure if the movie does enough to maybe, I guess, clarify that well enough.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and that I'm wrestling with that, but I think there's a thematic intent with that contrivance that could have very much worked. And I think maybe there is something in Benesh's performance that is able to capture that, which is why I guess I wasn't latched on to that problem as much as maybe you were, because I do think that is a possible trait. Everyone, if you find yourself making a mistake, you might find yourself trying to find a way out of that mistake. You might make up excuses to get out of that mistake, even if it is the wrong decision to do. So I get it from that angle, but I feel like there was more to explore to make the film maybe more about that angle. So instead, the film just kind of veers off into its thrilling nature. More of it almost uses it more as a mechanical crutch than it does a thematic one. And I guess that's where I can kind of see your point there. And I'm not gonna lie, I think the effect is good. Like it definitely put me on edge. And I think looking at this film as kind of a thriller, that's where I think it works best. But yeah, like maneuvering around that might be a little bit wonky in, kind of giving a clear definition as to the why and the how that's really all coming into play here.
And that's why I think the writing is the main culprit here, because I do think Benesh does her damnedest to make it work.
Sure.
And the performance I was enthralled by. However, I do think it is quite problematic that the film writes her the way it does in terms of Carla making this very intentional move, a conscious decision to have this recording, and then she never admits to it. She never comes out and explains her reasonings. There's no context ever provided. And in any normal setting, you would admit, at least to somebody, especially those in power, hey, I wanted to see if I could catch this thief because I had reasonings to leave this recording on, but that is never mentioned. There's never, Carla never admits what she does. And that I think is a problem because it writes her into this corner that throughout the rest of the film, you have to try to get yourself out of the corner, and you can feel the mechanics moving, narratively speaking, when that's happening. And I think a side effect of that, the major one for me, is again Carla feeling so confident and poised, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm feeling empowered. And in the next movie, the next moment, she cowers and is unsure. And again, it's not the performance. I think Banesha's doing exactly what she's asked to, but that's how the screenplay writes her. And I couldn't get past those volatilities in the writing.
The film, at least to me, suggested that if she were to come out and admit that she did this, that she deliberately put this recording out to try and catch this thief, she would have been fired for doing so. Because there is that conversation with the principal and the superintendent afterwards that this was a violation of faculty privacy.
I guess where we can meet in the middle here, because there isn't really much ambiguity. They know that she recorded this video. It's on her laptop. The video exists and it's on her laptop. So they know that she did it. I guess what I'm saying is her never providing her reasonings limits that specific character and the growth that we see of her here. I think it would help articulate that volatility in the character. But to your point, they don't do that. It's this hidden, vague mystery that the film wants us to wrestle with, I guess, because the school knows. There's no ambiguity in terms of who recorded the video. Yeah. They might not know exactly why, and that
they might not know why
some of this false ambiguity comes from.
I think that's why Carla doesn't admit to the why that she did it, because she knows that if she does, she's going to lose her job for this. And I think that's where maybe it's her ability to try and, maintain some sense of normalcy in all of this and try to really just maintain her occupation because she feels like what maybe she did was right. But so I think there is enough of that there from a mechanical standpoint. I think what I would have liked a little bit more of is, I guess, the wrestling of those morals of whether it was right or wrong. I think,
and that's it. Because I have the opposite interpretation of you. Because the school knows. The school knows. The video is on her laptop.
But the school knows that the school doesn't know she did it on purpose.
Well, and that's, I guess, because what I'm saying is if the school knows that she did it very objectively, she would be on the hook for that anyway. So it makes more sense that she would admit to it, at least to her superiors. So that way there's more of a leaning in terms of keeping your job, and that way you can explain yourself, and your superiors don't have to interpret why you did this. That to me is more of a fireable thing.
Well, see, the way I saw it, so you're saying that she should have admitted to doing this on purpose for I think she would have been instantly fired right away, and we have no movie if she did that. That's the whole point, because they basically say what she did was violated the law.
I guess that's kind of what I was getting at my opening.
So to me, it makes sense that she wouldn't admit to doing this on purpose because she doesn't believe that she did anything wrong, and she wants to maintain her job here.
And I know that we're getting bogged down in plot mechanics, and that's not the main thing.
I love this.
However, doesn't it, if the school board, and I'm just obviously talking vaguely here, but if the school board, if her superiors, the principal, whoever is in charge of her, if they know that she very objectively has this video, whether she did it or not, it is breaking the rules. That's a fireable offense. It doesn't matter if she did it intentionally or not. That's a fireable offense.
But is it?
But if she explains why she did it, then maybe there's some leaning there.
That's like saying that's like you're explaining like, okay, I broke the law, but I should still be forgiven. Nope, you still broke the law. Get out of here. Because I thought they spoke. I thought they spoke about it being an accident here. I thought like that was the talk about she accidentally left the video
No,
on.
I
It just
don't.
happened.
I never got.
I thought
a
that was the
hint of
case.
that at
I
all.
thought that was
No,
the case, that it
never
wasn't.
got a hint of that at all. Now, if that is there in the movie, if there's a line about that, again, I saw this like 2.5 months ago.
Yeah.
If
So for
there's
those
a
listening,
line
correct
of
us if we're wrong
dialogue
here.
that speaks to that, but I don't have any recollection of that at all because she records the video, she comes back, she confronts her coworker, and the next thing we know, she shows her superior. And then they leave the office and they go to confront the coworker, and then all hell breaks loose from there. I don't think there's any dialogue spoken to whether she did this intentionally or accidentally. She just shows the video to her superior, and then the film goes from there. So I
I'm trying to
never
remember
got
that.
any sort of indication that she was trying to lean her or kind of sway her superiors manipulatively that, oh, I did this accidentally, even though we know she did this intentionally.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall that. I could have sworn there was at least some passing line where it was said, "I didn't know it was recording" or something like that.
And that could be true. I'm willing to submit that might be what happened. I don't recall that at all, though.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. Again, like I saw this a little while ago as well. So this is maybe a question for our listeners who are maybe fresher on this film than we are. You know, let us know if there was something there that sort of, I guess, provided that context that we might be misinterpreting here. But even so, I guess one thing we can agree on, does the film, I guess, dive into those morals and that internal battle as much as it maybe could have? Because I feel like if anything, it's whether that question is still there or not, I feel like it's still really using it more as a crux to get to the meat of this film functioning as kind of a thriller. And while that is effective, and I think the film still maintains a lot of questions as to whether Carla is a good teacher or not. I think that's a very fun question to ponder over. It does feel kind of gimmicky at times. And I am kind of wrestling with that, like, I guess, exploitative nature of it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. And look, I wanted to debate the whole whether she did it or not thing, mostly for funsies.
Well, we don't find ways to disagree all that often. So sometimes we got to find the most meaningless thing to disagree on, and we just got to latch on to that.
Absolutely. Because in my mind, that makes the most sense.
Okay.
Now, that said, even if you are right and there's a passing line about how she thinks she did it unintentionally, that doesn't change things for me. If anything, that might make it worse because now she not only intentionally recorded this video, but now she's purposefully manipulating her bosses.
Well, that makes her more one note. Yeah.
Well, and the film doesn't wrestle with that either.
Yeah.
So that's just something that lingers out there in a way that I don't think is effective for the film or the character, in addition to what you're talking about, the morals of what she do the right thing or not. The film doesn't delve into that as much either.
If that passing line is here, it basically comes out and says, yeah, she's actually a crummy teacher.
Yeah. And lying to her bosses intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
That offers huge ramifications, but the film doesn't explore that in any way, shape, or form. Everything that comes out afterwards is all about Carla having to fight back against the volatility that, that comes about because of either her coworkers not liking what she's doing or parents and how they're now upset at all of this as well.
Yeah.
And so we are forced to see her respond to these things. And so the film feels very plot driven than it is character driven. Even if it does give us moments for Banesh to tap into the emotions of Carla. Again, this is not against the performance. I think the performance
she's good.
is
She's really good.
Very good. But I do think there are two Carlas here because of how the screenplay is. It backs itself into its corner and then is having to fight its way out of the corner throughout the rest of the film. And that swinging of the pendulum feels so heavy and so wide to me without any explanation, because there isn't much time for her to wrestle with these more ambiguities and the choices that she made. And the times that it does, I do think it is good. I think that's what I love about seeing her reaction to her own students. I think is really interesting. And you see a little bit of the power dynamic, not just between teacher and student, but the students themselves, and
Yeah.
how cliquey it is, and how that affects her as a teacher, which I think is really great.
Yeah.
And because you compound it with this volatility that she's now feeling from the outside, and it just builds like a waking volcano in Carla. So there is some catharsis here that I do appreciate, even if it did feel manufactured and getting from A to Z.
I will say the things about this movie I like the most is the way it depicts like elementary school gossip and how it spreads like a literal disease, not just among the students, but also to the parents. Like the parent teacher night scene is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. There are two scenes here that I genuinely love. That's one of them. And I feel like that's one that kind of does a great job balancing the thrilling like nature, the uncomfortability of it all with like kind of like this weird tinge of humor. I think there's a good balancing act happening there. The other scene I liked as well is when Carla is interviewed by the student newspaper. I feel like that's another moment that kind of captures the like the brutality of innocence, and does so in kind of a comedic way. I think those are the moments that really do a great job kind of bringing everything together, tonally speaking, and could have potentially added some nuance here. But it's like the way the plot has to move to get to not just those sequences, but then maneuver around other things, and then this relationship that she has with young Oscar, it ends up feeling kind of obligatory by that point, and I kind of wonder about how it's all balanced out in the long run as far as the film functioning in total.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about those two scenes, and those are two of the most memorable moments in the film.
Yeah.
And they also emphasize my deep and bitter frustration with this film.
It's like I think they work well. They're great in a vacuum, like how they function in
a vacuum.
Yeah.
I agree. My problem with those scenes is how they're followed, or I guess the scenes that come before.
Yeah.
Because the moment before the parent-teacher conference, again, depicts this empowered Carla, this woman that feels righteous in her decisions.
Right.
And then the next scene is this moment when the parents confront her and she's flustered and has no answers, and all of a sudden is just this completely different character. And it's the same thing with the interview with the newspaper, where she gives her truth. She acts as if this is the omniscient truth, which to her it is. And then when the newspaper writes what it does, she's completely like, well, who could have seen this coming?
The thing is, like those dichotomies you're talking about could have really worked. Like, I think on paper, like those ideas kind of make sense to have that kind of jarring nature. But there's something about the way it's formulated here that it feels like there's some piece missing. Right.
Yeah.
Because I think it makes sense that Carla herself, the way that the characters performed at least, would have this sense of belief and power that she did the right thing. And then when she's confronted by it, it shows just how weak and insecure she might be. So I think there's an idea there that could potentially work, but I'm kind of with you in the way that it maneuvers around those things from scene to scene, that it feels like, is this all really interlocking, or is maybe the performance doing all the work that it might make you think that it's working?
Oh
so
gosh.
it's like
a weaker performance in this film could have been just flat out bad. She saves it
true.
though. I do think she saves it, but you are right. I do want to emphasize, I have no issue with the dichotomy itself.
It's not the ideas. The ideas make sense.
Is feckless. The
that's fair.
execution is really bad, and as a result, it renders the character, at least in terms of what's driving her actions, what's truly driving her decisions, feels awfully vapid to me. And I could never connect to the character because of this manufactured volatility in the character that was set up at the beginning. And it just feels like I'm riding the wave of this character back and forth, and it feels like from scene to scene, it's predictable. You know which Carly you're going to get because of what came right beforehand, and there's no seamlessness in the transitions in getting us from one Carla to the next. Even though the dichotomy, I do think on paper makes sense. I don't have an issue with the idea, especially as it's ciphered through the school system and the power dynamics at play within the school system, which I do think is an important topic. And the relationships that she forms with her students here, the one in particular, the main student of Oscar, I think is great. I really like that.
That right there, that's the character that I did connect with.
I did as well. And so while there are elements of it that I really did like, the elements of the film that are good, I think are really good. But that's why my frustrations are enhanced, because I do think this is a film that has great potential, but is severely bogged down by this manufactured storytelling.
Well, I want to see a companion piece to this movie from Oscar's point of view. I
agree. That's probably where it should have been.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have been a very different movie. We probably would have gotten a lot less of those ideas on, the systematic power dynamics in the elementary school system as represented here in Germany. But I really did like Leonard Stetnish's performance as Oscar. And from his perspective, it would be a very different story, but I think an equally compelling one about that, like ripple effect of elementary school gossip, right? And I mean, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I can't tell you how many times that, at least for a brief moment, a classmate of mine was bullied because there was some rumor about one of their parents, right? Like it's like just something simple like that. It just goes to show how kids are probably the meanest people on earth. But like it makes sense as to why Oscar would then start lashing out in the way that he does, because he becomes the target of ridicule due to Carla's actions. And it's at no control of his own. Like, he has nothing to do with this. He's in many ways the biggest victim here, and you really feel bad for him. Yeah. And he lashes out in a way that, I mean, is arguably punishable, but you understand it and you sympathize with him. And it just goes to show how that kind of gossip can really hurt a child. And how children how they respond to that. So, like, from his perspective, I really did sympathize with him. Like, he's the character I latched onto dramatically in that way.
Well, and I think that's why I really wanted the power struggle of this film to really land. And because it's all funneled through Carla, it has to come from there. Yeah. But it doesn't work for all the reasons we've been talking about. But if that lands, I agree with you. Everything that you're talking about there really has a powerful impact, because you do feel for Oscar. He is a victim here because of those outside circumstances, and it amplifies the ridicule that he gets in the classroom, which then forces him to lash out. And it's heartbreaking. It is really devastating. And how that ultimately crystallizes between him and Carla at the end, I think is great. Honestly, for all of my frustrations with this,
the final scene's really good.
The final scene is great. It's one of my favorite endings of any movie last year.
The final shot is downright hilarious as well. Even though I don't know if it's meant to be, but it's like there's a comedic nature to the tone. But even so, like, that whole dynamic between the two of them in the classroom is very effective. I love the contemplative nature of it. Yeah.
I mean, 2023 was a great year for foreign cinema and other categories. Another in-session film category, endings, like closing scenes of the year. Oh my God. It was an astounding year.
This is in the running for that same category for endings specifically.
Absolutely.
It really is.
The ending to this film is absolutely terrific. And so, like, it sticks the landing big time. It comes out of the gate stumbling and falling all over itself, as far as I'm concerned. But God, it sticks the landing,
and maybe that ending is why I felt the need to still defend this movie, as you may have heard in my opening thoughts. And
it's ultimately why I liked it in the end.
Well, it's not even just that. It's like, even though some of the mechanics didn't really work for me, like we talked about, there was enough from these performances and Leone Benish, as we're talking about that, I think I was able to maybe oversee some of those blemishes at first. And the film has such an unnerving quality and such an uncomfortability that, like, you latch on to that feeling that you're having while watching it, that because the movie is instilling something in you, it's doing something right. Like the movie does make you feel something. It really does. And I think a lot of that is credit to the film's more like it's in its aesthetic properties. And I think the film is very well directed in that regard to be able to provide that. But yeah, writing could have been tightened a little bit.
I agree. I just wanted the writing to be tightened a little bit so those powerful impacts just hit a little harder. Because in the end, and I know I've been really hard in this conversation, but I've been hard because I do think the film has a ton of potential, but just doesn't reach it because the writing just wants to handcuff itself for some reason.
That's
and we
fair.
don't really see Carla wrestle with these ambiguities, this volatility in the character. And I really would have loved to have seen that, not just for how Oscar is involved, and, with Carla there in the end, but also I think about how we see her so often throughout this film feeling confident and empowered. And I think there's a facade to that in some ways. Because there are so many, like every time we see that, the next scene is then pulling that rug out to show us that really she is vulnerable and clueless and isn't really sure how to respond to any of this carnage that is happening around her. So clearly this confidence is coming from somewhere, but what does it mean? Like, what is she trying to hide? Like, is she just trying to hide the fact that she's crumbling? And if that's the case, I don't think the film does a good job of demonstrating that. It just shows us this volatility. Like, I don't think the film wrestles with this empowered confidence that she has. It just shows
that makes it seem too vague. Yeah, like vagueness is okay, but that's too vague, I feel like.
Yeah, because to me it just feels like we can't just show her vulnerable and upset the whole time. We have to show her in this very specific light of being confident, and I don't think there's a purpose to it, but I think you can argue that it is just a facade, that it's something she's trying to use as a mask because she is crumbling underneath. And boy, does that come through palpably in the aforementioned parent-teacher conference.
Scene. Well, another performance we haven't called out yet is Ava LeBeau as Mrs. Kuhn, who is sort of the subject of, not the subject of this ridicule, but kind of the like the catalyst of it. She's sort of the target of where this stemmed from. So this idea of theft involves Mrs. Kuhn, who also works at the school and is the parent of Oscar. Her performance is very good as well. So if there's another character I kind of sympathize with a little bit, it may have been her. That, despite the criminal like nature that maybe that character is involved in, like there is this argument that, is it worth hearing the other side of that story? Like, is there a why to all of this? And
we never get that at all.
We never get that. And I kind of like that we don't get that, because it kind of makes us as an audience start asking that question that maybe should have been asked in the first place. And I like that about that. So there are things about this movie that raise the right questions. I don't know if it goes about, I guess, dancing around those questions in the right way. It's like, I think that's the thing.
That's where I'm at. Because one of the other things too about Mrs. Kuhn that I think is really interesting is that it ultimately provokes this moment of magical realism that we get later on in the film.
Oh, the hallway scene? Yeah.
I don't know if that's effective. It is effective, but I don't know how I like it, because it's the only time that we get that in the film. Like, Çatak doesn't care to demonstrate any more magical real. It's just that one moment to demonstrate that there's some vagueness to Carla, and maybe she got it wrong.
I think the magical realism is not heightened too much, that I was able to, I guess, respond to it positively even in the moment and in
Oh, I
totality
think
with
it's
the film.
great. I think it's a great moment in the film. I
Mhm.
guess what I'm saying is it's the only moment we get in that regard. The rest of the filmmaking is conventional comparatively to that.
Oh, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I don't
It's
think the
like this
magical
random moment.
Well, I don't think the magical realism is heightened so much that it feels out of place. I think tonally it
Okay.
still fit the movie for me, and I think that's a moment that does a good job getting into Carla's head of the doubt and uncertainty she might be dealing
I
with.
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so thematically it works, and tonally, like I see your point that that's the one moment where magical realism is employed anywhere in the movie. So it might seem kind of jarring visually and tonally speaking. It doesn't feel too heightened that I found myself distracted by it, I
Okay.
guess I'll say.
It just feels so random for a film that is otherwise
Mm.
shot and edited pretty conventionally to have this one random moment. Just
I
I don't again,
it
it's
played with the
effective and also weird.
it played with the thrilling nature of the film for me, so I guess I was okay with it.
It worked for the moment. And I think again, amplifying my frustrations, it's so good. Why is there not more of it? Why is it just this one random shoehorn moment of ambiguity that is great,
Hmm.
but that's one of the few moments of Carla truly wrestling with the idea that she might not have the omniscient truth she thinks she
I I
does.
I think the only reason why it feels shoehorned is probably because the film maybe didn't do the right work in, I guess, backing Carla up in all of this in totality, right?
Yeah,
I think
because if the
if the maneuver
writing was
yeah,
more tightened, then that moment feels less of a contrivance.
yeah. I think it's less so the scene itself and not even the performance. It just goes back to the, issues we may have had with the film that we've been talking about for a while
The
already. I think that's really
consistency
the biggest problem.
or lack thereof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you have any other concluding thoughts here
Um,
on the teacher's lounge?
I mean, I think it's still a good movie. I do. I don't know if I recommend it that often. I mean, I do because I do think it's effective as a thriller. Like, honestly, I think if you take this as a thriller, I think it is mostly effective. And if you're looking for something to make you feel uncomfortable, which is a weird thing to look for in a movie, then yeah, you're going to get that here. You're going to get that.
Yeah.
Um, there are elements of this movie that will stay with me. I just, I think given the nature of this story, its narrative, the momentum of it all, like it's hard to tighten this as well as it could have, and I don't know if the film succeeds in that, but I like the questions it raises. I like what it's doing aesthetically. I love the idea that we never really leave the school. Like, we never see Carla's home life. We never see anyone's home life. Really, the only time we ever leave the school is when Carla has to chase Oscar outside and they go to a bridge, and I'll simply say that. But that's really the only moment. So I like the idea of the contained nature here. I I guess it's an idea. I like the idea of that.
I
Uh,
I hear what you're saying, and the idea I don't think is the problem, but I do
mhm.
wonder if that concept here is if that isn't maybe even at the root of this film's issues from a
Maybe. I mean,
writing
it
perspective.
makes this school feel like a prison.
It
And
makes it
yeah,
feel like a prison, and also all we see is Carla at work.
yeah,
And I think that forces the screenplay then to
to limit
linger in the
itself, right?
plot mechanics
Yeah.
and thrust us into these volatilities because we can't ever leave this space. So I kind of wonder if we left the school, there would have been room for Carla to get outside of that mental stress that comes with being in a physical
Yeah.
space and
Yeah.
allowing her to really wrestle with those. And again, I'm not saying that it needed to do that or that's what it should have
Well,
done.
yeah,
I just,
something
it,
like that. It didn't necessarily
yeah,
have to leave the school, but maybe there was at least one place within the school grounds that could have been that safe haven of
yeah,
sorts. Yeah,
yeah, just get us away from the main plot mechanics.
yeah.
But I think keeping us in the school And, it really had a hard time, I think, maneuvering around that. And the one time it did give us that safe space outside of the magical realism, and because it's magical realism, you can kind of put Carla anywhere, and that idea would work. And the hallway was perfect for that specific idea. The other moment is the bathroom right after she leaves the parent-teacher conference.
Yeah.
She goes into this space where she's alone, and she's allowed to just be cathartic. That I liked. Just kind of wanted more of that, I guess.
That's fair. That's fair. I think there was a way to tighten this movie up while still staying on the school grounds. I don't know if it took advantage of wherever that safe space could have been. So I'll also say this, I guess, just to round out these final thoughts. I respect teachers so much. I really do. If they have to go through this,
100,000, they should be paid like doctors. Honestly, they should.
This must be a stressful job. It really must be. And I know what's depicted here is not representative of all schools or even all students at this grade level. Like, I mean, obviously it really depends. It's a case by case basis. And even so, like, the students here are not really that bad. It's just the circumstances around this story bring out the worst in some of them.
That Carla invokes herself.
I mean, yeah,
she pretends like she did nothing wrong.
Yeah. So, but it's, yeah, just respect them. That's a hard job. It's a hard job.
No, I mean, it's a hard job, and I think also as parents, you come to have an appreciation for it as well because of the society we live in. And I kind of hate this. Brittany and I have talked about this all the time. I really despise that I don't get to spend most of my time with my kids. They will spend way more of their time with teachers and guardians than they will with you, unless you're a stay-at-home parent.
Yeah.
And I am unfortunately not one of those. So Sam and now Andrew, they spend, I don't know, 6-7 hours a day in a classroom, and I only get them from 5 to 9.
Yeah.
Mathematically, I don't get them as much as the school does.
Yeah.
And it's a little disheartening, but at the same time, you're putting your trust and your faith in these people to help raise your child and teach them, what they need to.
Yeah.
And you really do come to appreciate the great teachers, because even in Sam's case, that not all of them are very good.
Yeah, that's fair.
We've had some problems with a few of his teachers, but the good ones, man, we've loved. And
they leave an
you
impact.
Really do come to love them because they have
Yeah.
just as much of an impact on their life as you do, because they spend more time with them.
I was gonna say, like the impact that teachers have on a children's life, like that is so crucial to their upbringing. And I don't know about you, JD. Can you go back to your time from preschool and kindergarten onward? Can you even name your teachers at each grade level?
I can't name them all. I can name a few, like the ones that left an impact on me for sure. I can name. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
because I like my first grade teacher, I did not like at all. My second grade teacher, I will never forget her name or her face. She was an absolute doll. So yeah, I mean, it depends on the context, I guess, but
Yeah.
the ones that left an imprint, for sure. I don't think you forget them.
I think I can name all of mine, but to be fair, I went to a much smaller school. Like where I went to high school, my graduating class I think was 130, which is not the smallest, but it's not very big at all. But like most of them made either a positive or negative enough impact that I just don't forget them. But like the point I'm making is they're such a crucial, like defining moment in your childhood that I can understand how stressful that job might be, because that's when every young mind is kind of formulating their core
You're
memories.
coming into it, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like I look back in third grade and think, oh man, I learned so much from Mrs. Beekman. Like I really did. It's like I remember all those things.
Yeah.
So it's a weird way of me saying I sympathize with the character of Carla and what she's going through. I just wish the movie's mechanics were able to maneuver itself around that a bit better.
I
Because I think
agree.
there's a great potential. I think there's a great story here and the potential there for sure.
I agree. I think it just gets bogged down in the wrong things.
Yeah.
That's my issue with it. I don't think it devotes enough time or the right time to realizing Carla in ways that make sense for this movie. And I think because it does that, it renders this dichotomy in the character that I just did not care for. And again, I think there's maybe something interesting there in terms of this confidence that she shows,
Yeah.
but I don't know what any of that means. To me, it just felt like we needed to have that there so she's not this crumbling individual throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
And that's all it felt like to me, because the film didn't really wrestle with anything real. And the few times it did, I was enthralled by the movie, especially because of the performance.
Sure.
But I think those moments are far and few in between here.
Yeah. That's fair.
And I find myself frustrated. But I did like it enough. I feel like this conversation, maybe I am lessening on the film.
I think I kind of am too, because like I was so like I was able to latch onto the film's performative nature, its aesthetics, its thrilling nature, and I think all of those attributes are very effective. But it's like I feel like the film asks and raises really interesting questions.
It does. I agree.
I don't know if I felt enlightened or challenged by those questions because of the way it maneuvers itself. It's like it's enough to ask those questions and have a self-awareness of that. But is the film suggesting anything? Is it and I like that it doesn't necessarily take a side in whatever question it's asking, but there's a difference between not taking a side versus just simply raising the issue and not doing anything with it. And I think this film maybe veers a little bit too close to the latter for the most part.
Yeah. I agree. And that is the biggest problem, is that it raises some great questions. The power dynamics it depicts is all great, and the performance is fantastic. But
Yeah.
I think it's a far cry from doing anything of real meaning with those questions. And additionally, like from moment to moment, even outside of Carla's volatility, there's something to not just the overall writing, but the dialogue specifically at times, especially between Carla and her coworkers, because she is not willing to take a stance with her actions, which again, I know I'm getting bogged down in my own point, but that it just blows my mind that they write her to have this empowering confidence, but when she's confronted with, hey, why did you do that? That just dissipates. That's all gone. And now I don't have an answer for anything.
I want to watch that scene again to see if there's more context there.
and it's not even just that moment. It's throughout the whole film. It's like that.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's scenes in this film where she's having conversations with her coworkers about the video. And it reminded me a little bit of that scene we've talked about in Interstellar, where one astronaut is explaining a black hole to another astronaut.
Oh my gosh,
why
that
are we
scene.
having this conversation? Like, it's like, I feel like the dialogue here is a little vacuous in the same way, where her coworkers will ask her a question about the video and she doesn't come up with any answers. But like similarly in that scene with the astronauts, it just feels wrong. It feels like this scene wouldn't take place. Her conversations with her coworkers here, that's how I felt. Like there's something wrong here. Like, this is not how any normal person would respond to this.
Well, that's kind of a good point, because on one hand, I understand that the film is trying to showcase this rift between these teachers here, between Carla and the rest of the staff, that there is like this disagreement between them that they're not willing to acknowledge. Like the idea of Carla trying to put herself into these positions and to try and solve it herself. She refuses to ever ask for help. And it seems as though her colleagues don't really respect her all that much. So I like the idea that the film is trying to portray it that way. But you're right. The way it's written and the way it tries to bring these issues up, it feels like it's talking to the audience as opposed to characters talking to each other.
Yeah.
You're right. So that comparison to Interstellar is, I guess that is kind of fair. I hate that scene in Interstellar so
I don't
much.
like it.
I want to love that movie so much,
Yeah,
but that
I
scene
know,
just,
me too. And
oh my gosh.
yeah, so there's something about the dialogue that just feels off to me. And if there was a moment to explain why maybe she feels embarrassed, or I don't know, she's maybe feeling guilty about the decision, then that would make sense of it. But we have to assume those things. The film doesn't ever give us that with Carla. We have to assume.
Yeah, we do.
And that's not enough to work. So, I'm very mixed on the film.
I'm more mixed on it now
so
than I
thought
was.
coming into this.
I guess I'm still positive on it because there are too many good things here from a craftsmanship standpoint. But I guess, it does kind of collapse on itself a little bit.
It does. Yeah. At any rate, those are my thoughts on The Teacher's Lounge. And a lot of you might disagree. That's fine. It is Oscar nominated, so you might like the film a lot more than me. You can yell at me. You can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube.
I know some of our colleagues that really like this film. Yeah, so we might be. I mean, I still do like this film. Like, it still gets a passing grade for me. I'm just not sure. Like, when it comes to foreign language films, I would have loved to see The Promised Land get in there.
I agree. Certainly others. There were certainly others that could have taken that place. I do agree about Leonie Benesch, though. I know that people are raving about her, and I agree she's great here. It's the writing that hinders that performance for me.
Gotcha.
Her performance itself.
Yeah.
At any rate, if you want to yell at me, you can leave a comment below. You can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can yell at me via email, insessionfilm@gmail.com. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review us on those platforms. Really helps out the show a lot as well. And I believe that is it, Brendan. Am I missing anything?
I think that's it. We've covered a lot of great foreign language films from 2023. Some of them nominated, some of them not. Zone of Interest probably going to win that award. Perfect Days probably should win that award. In fact, I'd say it should win that award. But we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, I'm still in the Zone of Interest. I love Perfect Days a lot, obviously. But I think the Zone of Interest is the other directorial achievement of the year.
I'm also biased because I'm one of those people that might actually say Perfect Days is in my top 3 of the entire decade so far.
Yeah, it was your number 1 of the year. So
I like it that much. So just take my opinion with a grain of salt, I guess. That I have a very specific relationship to that film that many others may not.
I love it. Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Zone of Interest is a top 5 movie for me. Obviously, Nolan will win Best Director. But if it wasn't for Nolan, I truly think it should go to Jonathan Glazer.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think that is the other directorial achievement of the year. With all due respect to Scorsese, and I love Marty, love what he does with Killers, but man, Zone is a film that's only getting higher for me as time goes on.
Interesting.
I love
it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So, I like that film quite a bit too.
Yep. I do love it. At any rate, The Teacher's Lounge. See it? Let us know what you think.
Foreign cinema, baby.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. I wish I liked it more than I did.
That was stressful. That was stressful.